Hey everybody, well, welcome back to the podcast. And today is Friday, July 24th. Our new narrative, I'm going to add to that by going down America's memory lane, so to speak. But before I do that, please like, share, and subscribe. If you're getting anything out of this podcast, please share it with your friends, people you don't like, people you don't know. Just strike up a conversation. Hopefully, what you get out of today's video will have you talking for a little while. So I'm gonna go down memory lane through the eyes of Black America. And before you move on, this is going to be a lesson, so to speak, and why all people should be proud to be Americans, right? So all people who are Americans should be proud to be Americans. All right, so I'm gonna start with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. So if you didn't know, because your school system didn't teach you this, like mine didn't teach me, if you were able to vote back when they ratified the Constitution, you likely did, right? And so if you were Black, own property, and a male, sorry ladies, and in some colonies, likely Christian, you could vote to ratify the Constitution. Now, how do I know that? Well, it's in a very famous case called the Dred Scott case, and it's in the dissent. So we got skin in the game. Now, you could say, and it would be true, that the vast majority of Blacks were enslaved during that time, and only very few people had the qualifications to vote. That's true. Very few people had the qualifications to vote, period. It's not like it is today when all you do is 18, you can vote, right? So I'm starting from there. And so we're gonna move up to the Civil War era. 90% of the Black community in what we consider the United States were enslaved. 10% weren't. And those 10% were in the North, the Union, right? And what were they fighting for? They were fighting for two things. One, the ideas that were unique to America, were unique. These were unique ideas. The founders of this republic had some very unique ideas. And we're talking the history of mankind, right? And that was individual responsibility, individual liberties, the rights, individual rights, right? And the rights of the government. We're giving over some of our sovereignty to a government, right? That's never happened before. Something else has never happened before. People got together to end an institution as old as writing, slavery. The first time a group of people got together to say, you know what, I don't think slavery is right, was like in 1733. We're talking the history of mankind. Nobody gave a damn about slavery. Evidenced by everybody was enslaved, including white Christians, right? Millions of them. Chinese enslaved millions of people. Japanese people enslaved people. Arabs enslaved people. Africans enslaved people. If it wasn't for the Africans who enslaved other Africans and sold them to white people, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you, right? So next time you think about reparations, make sure you start at the beginning. And that is when Africans sold other Africans to Europeans who put them on boats and ended up here selling them to the people in America, right? So the Civil War ended an institution as old as writing. Slavery was not unique. It is not a unique Black experience. What is unique about Blacks in the Civil War is that we ended an institution as old as mankind. And anybody who fought to end slavery should be proud of the fact that this country shed blood and treasure to end that institution. I don't care if you're white, Black, Jewish, whatever. You should be proud of it, right? Now, what did the newly emancipated do? they're free. Well, what does that mean? It's something we don't think about. Well, before they weren't free. What does that mean? No responsibilities. There was no agency. If you were a slave, how'd you get fed? You had to depend on the master for that. What if your kid got sick? You got to depend on the master for that. Where's your house at? You got to depend on your master for that, right? What about your retirement? Well, hopefully your master's nice and you can hang around, right? Total dependence for generation after generation after generation. 90% of Blacks in America would fall into that category. 10% didn't. They were in the North. And they were getting their groove on with the ideas of independence, individual freedom, the free markets, entrepreneurship, all that good stuff, right? But once slavery ended, now you got just a huge group of people who don't know what freedom is. And I always say, if you ever want to read a good book that's long, but it's good, Gone with the Wind. And there, you will see how a lot of the slaves were like, I don't know nothing about freedom. I don't know what this is. I don't know what y'all talking about, because they didn't. And so when the war was over, here you got millions of people free with no property, no money, and no idea what responsibility is. Individual responsibility had to be taught. And there were some great people in the North who came down to the South to teach these values that we consider capitalist, free market, the values of free markets and how to operate in these free markets. And what's the first thing you got to do in a free market? You got to obtain some skills, and that's what they did. So that population did something no other population of people has ever done before. 50% of them became literate within a generation. Did they do that because they were Black? No, they did that because of the country we lived in, the values that we aspire to and hold dear, right? Those values were imprinted on them to participate in this thing called capitalism, right? 50% became literate within a generation. Get that? It's important because a lot of Eastern European countries didn't achieve that feat until the late 20th century. So the newly emancipated, on the move, on the uptick, right? You even got Madam C.J. Walker, who became a millionaire, self-made millionaire, right? The first self-made female woman millionaire who happened to be Black. Again, Black is not a skill set. So it wasn't her Blackness that made her a millionaire. It was her entrepreneurship in a society that cultivates entrepreneurship, the free market and all that. Black is not a skill set. That is, unless you're a poverty pimp or, you know, a race hustler, right? So you got people like Madam C.J. Walker, who I'm just using her as an example because she's in the history books. Someone we don't hear about a lot is Louis Lattimore. And hey, look up in your ceiling. You know who invented the light bulb, but he invented that light bulb with a paper filament, and it went out like that, right? Always went out. Lewis came up with the carbon filament. This wasn't yesterday. This was back supposedly when all Black folks did was run away from white folks with whips, right? He is the one who allowed the light bulb to sustain longevity. This guy, right, is why you got longevity in your light bulbs. And this was in the 1800s. This is what capitalism does. This is what free market does. This is what value in education does. And the newly emancipated chase those values. And you got someone who was championing those values named Booker T. Washington. Him and other capitalists, right, created the Tuskegee University. Other capitalists being the very wealthy, like Rockefeller and Carnegie, right? And poor capitalists. You don't have to be rich to be a capitalist. Ideas, right? It's the ideas. It's not a monetary set. Okay, now a monetary limit. Well, you only make $1 million, so you're not a capitalist. No, it's the values you hold, right? So the poor, newly emancipated, would sell dinners to donate to get this university going. They were capitalists at heart, right? They didn't have all this money, but they were on the uptick. Matter of fact, every statistic that the Black folks were in back then were on the uptick. 85% of kids were born to two-parent households. Black labor force participation was higher than whites. Matter of fact, they were getting their grind on so much that racist politicians enacted the Davis-Bacon Act during the Jim Crow era, right? The 1930s. What's the Davis-Bacon Act? That's the federal minimum wage law. Why was that enacted? Because these people on the grind, getting their skills and going participating to the market, were able to underbid comparable carpenters in the North. These people in the South, the Black carpenters in the South can go up to the North, and with the help of white business owners in the North, would underbid the carpenters in the North. And so what did those guys do? They use racism and prejudices to usher in the Davis-Bacon Act, the federal minimum wage. Why do I say racism and prejudice? Because they banked on prejudices to get people to pay people a minimum of $1. And if you are going to pay someone a minimum of $1, they're banking on your prejudice to give that dollar to a white person. I hope that made sense, right? So I'll move on. Now, you got Jim Crow, ain't no stopping us now, as the old song goes, right? Still on that uptick. And we get the civil rights law passed, the same laws that were basically presented to Congress right after the Civil War, but that's another subject for another day. Then in 1960, something happened. We started to slip and slide, go off the rails a little bit, right? In the 70s, 80s, violence is going up. Single parent homes are going up. Everybody going to jail, right? What happened? Well, you get this stuff about institutionalized racism. Well, Jim Crow was institutionalized racism, right? I don't consider these disparate outcomes as institutionalized racism, right? I always say, don't blame it on institutionalized racism, blame it on the alcohol, right? That institutionalized racism didn't get you pregnant, right? The alcohol probably did, right? That led to some dumb decisions. And now you don't have the skills to participate in the workforce, but you got a baby to take care of, right? Man or woman. So, let's not blame it on the system. Don't always blame it on systematic racism. Blame it on alcohol. Now, what happened in the 60s? I'll tell you. From a book I'm reading, The Future Once Happened Here. I'm just going to, it explains a lot, okay? Individualism and personal merit. The African American Teachers Association argued was a myth. It's a myth. Individualism is a myth. Personal merit is a myth. I'm pretty sure Madam C.J. Walker, Booker T. Washington, and everybody else, who were adults at the time, who were on that grind, who started their own business, who was raised in a nice family, owned their own home, even if they weren't able to own a home because of red line districts. I'm pretty sure they would disagree with this, but these people were teaching their kids, right? So they argued that individualism and personal merit was a myth perpetuated by whites to create Black versions of the white middle class or Black Anglo-Saxons. No. Black capitalists. Capitalism has nothing to do with Anglo-Saxons, right? If it did, how come the Polish people didn't come up with the Declaration of Independence first, individual liberty and responsibility? How come the Russians didn't, right? How you know what I mean? Like, this isn't race specific, but the African American Teachers Association made it race specific, right? So the African American Teachers Association called for an alternative Black value system, which implies that there was already a value system in place that was working pretty well. I mean, it got us from slavery up until the 1960s, always on the uptick, right? Then we flipped the script and got a new value system, and look what it's done, right? So the Black value system, based on principles of collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics and unity, giftedness in Black children, could be measured by a willingness to challenge authority. And if that doesn't sound familiar to you, it's Marxism. It's socialist Marxism. That is what took us off the road, man. You can say systematic racism all you want. We still Black. And Nigerians who come to America and kick ass economically and educationally, they're still Black. They don't share these Marxist socialist values. They don't come here for the racism and the socialism and Marxism. The new immigrants to America from Africa, or the Blacks from the Caribbean, or the Blacks from South America who are kicking butt in America, they don't come here for socialism and Marxism. They come here for capitalism, individual freedom and responsibility. That's what helped the newly emancipated. That's what can turn us around, right? So with that said, I think I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna leave it there. So talk about that with your friends. You know, what do you think? You know, leave some comments below. Be nice and respectful. People may read it. With that said, have a great weekend. Hope you're doing well. Again, like, share, and subscribe. Talk about this amongst yourselves, amongst your friends. Make a new friend. Especially share it with the SJW in your life. All right, peace. Have a good weekend.